All right, and welcome to the CodeX Cantina. I am Una.
And I am the spectrum of crypto.
Tonight you shall be visited by the three ghosts of crypto.
Don't mind me hovering over your bed.
Today we're doing The Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens.
Yes.
Look at the size of my book there. It is huge. Get jealous.
Oh.
But we are doing Staves 1 and 2, and we'll follow up with Staves 3 through 5 for next week. Now, Christmas Carol is one that I think is not traditionally broken down from a literary perspective, but we thought we'd give it a shot, and I think we have enough here that's worth talking about.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of good talking points that are past just the traditional on the surface, because those are very apparent. But I think if you look deeper, there's some really good stuff to kind of delve into here by the master Charles Dickens.
The master himself, and we do have a Cricket on the Hearth video that's coming out here in just tomorrow, I think, actually, as a matter of fact. And then we will do part 2 of this in a week. So make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you would like to follow up on that as we journey through Charles Dickens' Christmas stories.
Ooh.
All right. So the way we usually do this, if you're new to this channel, is you typically have kind of like an initial reaction, quotes, which is all spoiler free, and then we'll go into kind of a plot and discussion section for this piece. So in terms of initial reaction, let's do the comparison, because this is your first time reading it. Is that correct, Crypto?
Yes, this is my first time reading this story.
This is my first time as well, and of course you and I both know this because it's been plays, dramatic readings, movies, TV shows. They've all referenced and ripped this off in various ways, right?
Yeah.
What is your initial reaction to reading it?
My initial reaction is that it is very different than Scrooged.
Oh, yeah, Scrooged.
Well, that's my first, big Bill Murray fan.
Oh.
And that movie was super popular in the 80s. And that was my first exposure to this story. And, of course, I saw other renditions of it. And this story is very much not what I expected. And I'm really enjoying it so far.
Dickens is a master when it comes to this. This is his prime. This is probably his most famous story, if not Oliver Twist, I would say.
Yeah.
All right, so in terms of quotes, I've got a good one that I feel like resonates really well with maybe our own decisions for how we view life and how we view happiness. But this is when he's talking about Fezziwig.
Hit me.
It isn't that, Spirit. He has the power to render us happy or unhappy, to make our service light or burdensome, a pleasure or a toil. Say that his power lies in words and looks, in things so slight and insignificant that it is impossible to count 'em up. What then? The happiness he gives is quite as great as if it cost a fortune. That's one of the big takeaways that I had when I was reading this, is that all the fog, all the darkness. This is not as kiddie as I thought it was. I think my first exposure was maybe Muppet Christmas Carol. Yeah. So this is definitely very interesting and a lot more religious, I feel like, than perhaps some of the translations have been.
Yeah, I think that's the obvious is the religion added in aspect of it, but I think that what that quote encapsulates, and I think that Dickens is trying to get across, maybe through the whole story, but at least this first part is definitely it's a philosophical tale of as well as a morality one.
Yeah,
I feel.
I always took that line. We're going to probably skip. Okay, we're going to skip the plot, and we're just going to go straight into discussion because most everyone should know the plot at this point in time. If not, please check out the book. It's only 50, 60 pages.
I mean, you can do it real quick, right? You got
let me pause the video. Go read it now. Okay, welcome back. So what I think is interesting about that is that line, if they're going to die, they better hurry up and do it and decrease the surplus population. I always took that as a commentary on Scrooge's character, right? He's such a miser. He's so anti-Christmas, so anti-emotions. And I think if you enjoy the story on a surface level, that's fine. And I think that's totally cool. And you can walk away with that and still feel rewarded, which is how beautiful this story is, that I think what he's really writing about is, we talked about in our Cricket on the Hearth video that we just recorded that's coming out tomorrow, how Charles Dickens' family was put into debtor's prison. And at the time you had the poorhouses where they'd scoop up people that had no money or were out on the streets. And you can see that this is him beginning that commentary on those places aren't enough for people. Just giving someone a home isn't giving them the connection, the love, the feelings that I think we need as human beings. And that's not what those places provide, right?
Definitely. And I think that's one major aspect of it is financial. And this is something that I steal this idea from my wife, is that in life you have you have the F's, and one of them is finances. And you can't be truly happy without your finances in order. And even if you have your finances in order, doesn't mean that you're going to be fulfilled or have a good life, because Scrooge's finances are in order. And I think that Dickens is obviously portraying that even if his family had all the money in the world and not been in this debted situation, that maybe necessarily he still wouldn't have had happiness or peace. I think that's kind of the aspect that he's going for.
And something that I feel like gets cut that is I took this as super important. When Marley is leaving the house and he looks out the window, do you remember what he sees?
Okay, this is where he's looking over all the other ghosts?
Yeah. The air was filled with phantoms, wandering hither and thither in a restless haste, and moaning as they went. Every one of them wore chains like Marley's ghost.
Yeah, so representing society's sins.
This isn't just Scrooge going through. This is obviously a societal problem, and he even has that comment in there that some are linked together like governments.
Yeah, that was funny. That's a little jab there.
I can see why it's cut, but that's an important line and an important part to understanding that he's saying this is a societal issue. Lots of people are going through this.
Yeah, so I think that you see the haves and the have-nots in Great Britain during the 19th century, and he's pointing that out, that this is not just some cranky old rich guy's thing. This is everybody's, sin or burdens that is maybe drowning society as a whole.
Oh, absolutely.
I think.
Yeah. Now
when they do the plays and the movies and everything.
Now you bring up an interesting point about 19th century and what these people were going through. Did you know that ghost stories are just a thing at Christmas to like Victorian culture?
I think that you had taught me that, and I thought that was really interesting because I didn't know that. And now, is that specific to British culture?
I think it's specific to cultures going through this industrial revolution sort of thing. From what I saw in the documentary, it was talking about, well, one, at night, gas lamps were used, and that could lead to some hallucinating. But also, these people on the surface were going through these great changes from a societal and economic perspective, that sometimes they didn't know how to kind of like express insecurities in this new world, how to live in this new world. And somehow these ghosts or these ideas of the creaks and the big houses and the expansions, like you're not really sure what it's causing, that came out in the form of a lot of ghost stories for Victorian culture, which I think is really interesting because I never really thought about Christmas or Victorians as being ghost culture centered. But now that I kind of like researched it and watched this documentary, there are hundreds of ghost stories, and I don't know how I missed it through all these years.
Yeah, that's actually really easy to spot now when you think about it, that they would use the supernatural to explain the natural because they don't understand what's going on due to all this new technology being infused into their everyday lives. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense now that you put it so simply.
Yeah.
I kind of feel dumb for missing that.
No, I mean, a documentary had to explain it to me. So now you are, correct me if I'm wrong, you're doing the audiobook. Is that correct?
Yes, I did the audiobook. Doing the audiobook.
Now, I was going through and editing that cricket video that we filmed the other day, and I had a point that I started to bring up, but I got sidetracked, and it happened here in Christmas Carol. Well, we have to talk about this, and you're not going to know this if you just do the audio presentation. So for all those people that have watched the play, watched the movies, that have had the dramatic readings or the musical presentations, you're going to miss this. Charles Dickens, I don't know if you've noticed this. I don't know how I missed this if this was all over Oliver Twist, and I feel like a total schmuck. I mean, it was 15 years ago probably that I read it. But
You were a schmuck then.
He has random words yes, I was. He has random words that are capitalized throughout this whole piece. So when he is talking to Belle, for example, and they're talking about the golden idol, and they talk about the greed that he is experiencing, greed is capitalized.
Oh, it's one of the 7 deadly sins, so I could see that being significant.
And then in the next section, they mention the words gain, truth, and hope, and those are all capitalized too, but they're not proper nouns. There's no reason for those to be proper. There's no reason for those to be capitalized in proper English.
So would you put those letters together, or is it as like a puzzle?
Oh, that would be really interesting. I didn't try doing that, but I did Google Dickens grammar.
You cheated.
I did, because I was like, what is going on here, Dickens? What are you doing? And part of what he would do is he would actually take letters that he wanted you to pay attention to that would be important or be an underlying theme. He'd capitalize them.
Oh, okay.
So right after this greed with Belle and Hope, or with Belle, that's when he talks about gain, truth, and hope, where Scrooge is now need to go on to that journey of gaining truth and hope. So it's kind of like one of those, what do they call it, like the SLP, where he's got like the hidden meanings in the words, if you will.
Yeah, so this is his way of drawing attention to subliminally say, hey, this is going to matter later. But I think that the way we read in society today, and again, I'm not trying to like judge or anything, but I know personally, and people that we read with in our groups and stuff, that's going to be lost very easily. The way we consume media today, and especially because he never would have probably fathomed when he wrote this that it was going to be turned into movies that didn't exist, or audio recordings didn't exist yet.
Yeah.
So that really does change how you would try to pick up on things later through the story. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because obviously I miss things as a result of only listening to it. And that sucks.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even back in the day, a lot of Victorian writing was serialized. And I think part of it was due to cost. Even with that, they still had dramatic readings. Like Dickens was somewhat of a famous person going around and orating his stories. He's apparently a very good reader of his own works. Even listening to it back in the day, back then, people would miss out on that. I would love if someone out there has a quote on how Dickens used this literary technique and kind of subversively hidden in the key elements. I would love to know if he ever made a comment on that when he was orating, as opposed to just the written word that he had that was printed. I think that would be interesting to see, what did even Dickens view at the time of like, oh yeah, people are missing out, or did he not view it as a big deal?
Yeah, you'd have to look at a biography on his life to know that.
All right, so here's one question that I had when I was reading. I wasn't totally clear on what was happening with his sister and kind of like his boyhood thing. Like he was being taken home, but I don't think I know enough about the culture at the time. Like, do you know what was really, like, how would you explain that scene?
So I think it goes back to the first time that the ghost takes him to the boys' home. And I think that the setting itself is an important aspect here. Dickens goes into a lot of detail explaining the boys' home, of how decrepit it is. And I think that's to give you an idea of how his parents viewed Scrooge's worth. And that he's looked down upon maybe as like the black sheep of the family. Okay. And that he maybe could just be the traditional, boys are sent to these boys' homes to get an education, and was the typical way. But that would have implied that they had money. And I don't think they had a lot of money. And that's why Scrooge becomes kind of greedy with money, and it becomes such a central focal point of his life, is because his family's not very affluent. So
okay, so it's kind of a hidden way to bring up his family's attitudes or emotions, potentially.
Towards him, yeah.
Okay.
And then as the ghost passes time, which I think is written in a really cool way, the way he has it kind of morph through time, and you see him getting older. Eventually his sister shows up and says, basically, I begged our parents to let you come home. You can be a man now. And I think that this really starts showing the connection that he has not only to the world, but I think to his humanity, is his sister. And that his sister being his only connection to humanity is why he goes down this horrible path of becoming a terrible person, is because when that's broke, he loses his humanity and becomes this very bitter, hateful person, where his only joy in life is stealing the joy of others because of what happened. And I think that it's okay to say that at this point in time, we know that his sister is dead.
Okay.
Right?
Well, she's definitely dead. They said that.
So, spoiler alert. I just want to make sure, that people understood that she's dead. And I think that, like, every time he sees that nephew, he's resentful that, like, his sister's dead and I don't have my connection to my humanity anymore.
That's an interesting point, because they don't say when it happens. They just say that she does die. And did she die? Did she possibly pass away with that Belle scene when Belle said, "You've changed," right? You now worship the golden idol. I wonder if I've always viewed it as a desire for gold, but maybe you're right. Maybe with his happiness being taken away, his joy is taking happiness away from other people by taking their gold, in a sense. Very, very interesting. I hadn't really thought about it from that angle. I'm going to have to think about that as we go through Staves 3 through 5.
Yeah, and I think that I don't think there might be a lot more explored on that. I think there is a lot of inference because we're going to see the ghost of present, I assume, and then we're going to see the ghost of future if it follows anything nearly to the movies, or the movies followed correctly to the book, I guess I should say.
Yeah.
So we'll kind of see how that pans out. But I think that there's a loss of faith there. And I think that's the religious aspect. It's very superficial on the surface, very much par for the course for Charles Dickens, right?
Yeah. Now I've also got written down as a talking point, but I'm going to save it for Staves 3 through 5 because I know this will be expanded. But the religious side of things.
Oh, are we ending on a cliffhanger?
We're ending on a cliffhanger because
that's a first for the channel.
Because I know this will be explored further with the next few Staves. Well, as I assume it will. All of Dickens' writings is highly religious, so
stay tuned for that, subscribers.
I didn't mean to make it that cliffhangery. Gosh, you're making it so soap opera like. All right. With that said, I guess we are going to do Super Cliffhanger this week. Thank you for checking it out. Please consider subscribing for the Cricket, as well as part 2, where we go through Staves 3 through 5. And I can promise you, even if he doesn't explore it, I will bring up the religious thing. I promise not to leave you hanging.
Cliffhanger for a 170-year-old book. I love it. Thanks, guys.
All right. You never know what you're going to get here because we don't either. Peace out.
Peace out.